One of the mistakes that startup founders often make is that they do not have a fixed development cycle.
I should be going to the user even before the launch. Should I go to in 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
MVPs earlier. When we talk about MVPs or when I think about MVPs, I think weeks, not months. If you aspire to become an entrepreneur in this age, I think you should definitely learn coding.
Hello everyone, this is Sajad from Onekode. This is our first episode in our Onekode podcast. We developed a small studio here. It took a while, but we are ready to go. Our first guest is VP of Product from Remoto. It's a startup and it's a successful startup. And today we will be talking about MVPs and how to build applications for startup and launch them, and a lot more about how to basically think about your startup applications or whatever software application you want to launch. Without any further delay, let me welcome our guest here. Saad is here with us. Saad is VP of Product at Remoto, which is a successful startup. Saad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're about to have.
So how is it at Remoto? How is it going?
Remoto launched their MVP last year, and it has been a great success. We've just closed off our pre-seed round last month, and now we're looking to go into the seed round. We have some potential good investors and people who are really interested in the Remoto product itself. So yeah, it's a good journey so far, and we are looking forward to continued success in the future.
How important it is to narrow down your features for your MVP? Like, for example, if I'm in recruitment or social app or any other app, I can think of 100 things, right? And how do I plan for, okay, I'll go with first 2 or 3 things for now or in the first launch? How do we determine that?
I think like this is something that is very important, especially for startups, because as you said, it's so easy to get lost in like in the sea of specs. So I think one thing that can help is that you should have the clarity of what is the primary problem that you're trying to solve, or the primary area that you're trying to focus on, and you should not let anything kind of distract you from that. As long as you're focused on that thing, I think it will help you to keep the distractions away. Someone from the team comes up with an idea. What we do is that we try to discuss, all right, this is the spec that we're trying to kind of incorporate into the product. How is it going to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve at Remoto?
So how you in in this kind of environment where you are influenced so much by these kind of products, how you still stay focused on, okay, these are the things that I need to focus on my first launch or whatever the plan is.
I think firstly, like as you said, it's so easy to get distracted by flashy things, and you have to have some kind of mechanism. It can be a team effort as well. If you're working with like-minded people, there has to be some sort of mechanism that keeps you kind of focused on the point, or whatever your values are. There has to be something which you can come back to if you get distracted. I think there should be some sort of mechanism to kind of help you with that. Secondly, like including the specs in a product, I think that can vary from what stage of life cycle the product is in. If you want to talk about startups specifically, I think the approach would be whatever list of features that helps me get the job done in the minimal way possible, but helps me release quickly. You mentioned MVPs earlier. When we talk about MVPs or when I think about MVPs, I think weeks, not months, right? It has to be efficient. Otherwise, you're very likely to kind of get twisted in your own ideas, and kind of lose track of time. Uh, like the few mistakes, or one of the mistakes that startup founders often make is that they do not have a fixed development cycle of some sorts, and they gather every week or every month for that product meeting, and everybody comes up with, like, the startup has that kind of critical thinking mindset as well. and everybody comes up with their own ideas, and it's so easy that the team would lose track, the team would not stay focused. So I think having specific development cycles would help. Writing down the specs would help, and again, associating those specs with some sort of success criteria or with some sort of goal oriented mentality would help as well. There has to be some sort of mechanism in your team on which you kind of evaluate your specs, evaluate your ideas. I understand that you should, in your team, you should encourage the mentality where everybody can come up with an idea. But I think there is also need to be an encouragement in terms of critically analyzing your own ideas and the ideas of your teammates as well.
What you are suggesting is having a clear cut plan where everything is time bound, that kind of urges you to stick to a plan and go with it, right?
Definitely.
And if people are changing things when they get inspired from new feature or something, they say, okay, we want this one as well, and when we do the launch, we will add this feature as well. So that's an interesting point. And you mentioned that not months, weeks, right? So in terms of going to the customer or going to the user, how early that should be? Like I should be going to the user even before the launch? Should I go to the user in 2 weeks or 3? What should be the time period for going to the user?
I think, especially in case of startups, how do you define a launch? You have to define a launch for yourself. Like we're talking about flashy things in terms in these days of social media, is it's so easy to get distracted by launch of some big company like Google or Facebook. They're doing their launches or they're introducing their features this way now, and they're already very well established companies. All right, for a startup, you have to kind of define what is launch for you. You do not have to have a show offy or a very, kind of flashy sort of a press release that would kind of put you on the map. I think like maybe you can define a launch. All right, I acquired my first customer. This is my launch. You can treat that as a launch. You do not have to, 3 social media platforms and 4 members of social media team and a press release, and this is a launch. I don't think like a startup has to worry about the launch aspect as such, especially for the MVPs. Whenever we bring MVP, a critic might say, why do I need an MVP? Why can't I just do a Google survey or customer interviews and figure out what the customer wants and then get on with the development? The term or the specific word validated is meant to be there because like customers don't know what like this thing is in development phase or is in testing phase. They are just interacting with the product. All right, so their reactions are not kind of scripted of some sort. Like the reactions you would get or the responses you would get would be kind of organic or natural. So that would make your data set more reliable, whatever data you're trying to get. So for me, MVP in short is that a minimum version of your product which you can take to the customer and gather feedback. So kind of to measure your next steps, what you should do next.
I'm still thinking about that definition of MVP, right? Because I've worked with people and with products where people would spend like six months on developing of the MVP. Is it one thing definition? Is it one definition for MVP, or everybody has their own definition of MVP?
In terms of like the strict definition or the term itself, how it got introduced, this is just simply minimum viable product. All right, and the definition is in the name of it. But this is not just like all of the things that we will be talking about here. It's not a blueprint to success for everyone to follow. It's not just like that. Everybody or every product would have their like customized journey or their own journey, and things would kind of like differ for a lot of people in a lot of cases. But for me, as I said, minimum version of your product which lets you help like kind of gather feedback, test your thought process. We kind of name it as MVP experiment rather than just MVP. And what we mean by that is we're kind of like testing the waters a bit. Like we're running an experiment to see if the assumptions that we are making are true or not. Like in the scientific process, as you know, The experiments are there to test your hypothesis. All right. So whenever you're thinking about a problem or whenever you're thinking about a product, you're definitely making some assumptions.
Yes, it will depend upon the type of product, but in terms of what kind of people should be part of your team, because this is, if someone is working with a very well developed company, they can have the layer of working at a slow pace or at their own leisure time or whatever you call it. But with MVP, you need to ship fast at times, you need to iterate and things like that. So um, how do you think about that? We need to set up processes and teams?
I think that is going to be dictated a lot for from the kind of product that you're trying to develop. Like for example, if I'm trying to develop a very kind of technical savvy sort of a product, I would definitely need someone with strong technological background. I cannot build an MVP. Like for example, if I'm working with a very complex AI technology, I cannot expect a business person to make some sort of a web template of that. I need someone with a strong technological background. This is just one example. So I think a lot of it would be dictated by the product, the kind of product you're trying to launch or the kind of market you're working in. Like startups are generally very fast paced. So you kind of need people who have the same sort of mentality. But other than that, it's mostly about the attitude of the people that you're trying to hire. And I think in a startup, you need to hire people who are willing to work at a fast pace, who are willing to, work for a vision. If you talk about the processes, I think just having some structure in the beginning is nice. You do not need to follow a big company's like a sprint model, like an exact sprint model and like spec sheets and stuff like that. Some sort of process needs to be there. You can have like a week of development cycle or 2 weeks of development cycle, and you can make it a practice of writing down specs. What that does is like kind of it helps the whole team to be aligned on the same things. If you do not write stuff, if you do not document stuff, especially in startups, there is a very wide chance of people working in different directions. Documentation is very important, like writing down specs and like sharing it with team members and like having those sort of system where communication is very clear.
If you are not lucky enough to get same visionary kind of people who would have the same passion and energy for the product, how would you hire someone or onboard someone and then give them the vision? Because I will come to the tools and the technologies and everything, but I think the most important thing is the attitude.
Yeah, the last thing you mentioned, working in teams is kind of a necessity at this point because you're competing with other teams, and you cannot expect to go on a solo ride and expect to come out as a hero. So you definitely need good team with you to work on your vision. I think as long as like just let's just break it into two different things. I think finding a partner, or finding a co-founder, and hiring the team. These are like we should treat them differently. You cannot expect your team to have that sort of attachment with the vision as you have. I think it's unfair to those people. All right, because like you are so attached to your idea and you are so attached to your vision, you expect everyone to work on it like you do, and you expect everyone to think about it like you do. But I think it's unfair to someone who you have hired on wages. I think there needs to be an expectation adjustment from the founder aspect. And this applies to the outsourcing firms as well. Exactly, exactly. You cannot expect them to be as attached to your vision as you are. And I think that this is a mistake that a lot of people do make because they're so attached to their ideas and they're so attached to their vision, they kind of go unfair to the people they've hired. But as far as like finding a partner or co-founder, I think this is something still very it's very rare to find someone who is like as crazy about the vision or as visionary about something as you are. And there are platforms out there for this now as well. Well Found is one of the platforms that like is kind of specialized in startup hiring, and a lot of job opportunities there are like for co-founders. So you can definitely explore these avenues, but I can tell you now it's going to be a tough journey.
And how this is solving the problem of the co-founder thing, let me tell you how Bubble is saying that they are solving this problem. They market it like this, that you don't need a technical co-founder because we have made it so simple for you that you can create application yourself. Yani means you are the visionary and you can be technical enough to build it yourself, which is fine. Maybe few people can, but in the past 6 months, I came across, or about 20 people came to me who wanted to launch their own products. Some of them are clients now, and they said, okay, we started with Bubble and we were able to create this much thing, 2 pages or UI thing, or but we are stuck now. And if someone is marketing it like this, okay, you can be your own CTO, which I am against, because if you're not that technical enough, you will struggle at some point, because again, it's the evolution of the technology. You are still relying on the old technology.
If you aspire to become an entrepreneur in this age, I think you should definitely learn coding, some sort of technical skills, even if you're not from a technological background. Not because you'll end up coding stuff yourself, but it'll help you kind of build your team or find a technical co-founder. You'll be able to have at least have a conversation with potential partners or potential team members in a better way, because now you do know some basics as well. So like this is just some random thing that came to my mind from this discussion. I think you do need to have some sort of technical background. It's always be useful in this day and age. Secondly, I think the low code no code platforms are doing a great job, and in terms of fast tracking that process, making it very efficient for an MVP development point of view, or for an initial version of a product. I'm a big fan of these low code no code platforms that are coming up. I haven't had much of a personal experience with them, so I'm not really sure about their scalability for bigger products. From what I know, a lot of bigger companies are not yet, very confident in the scalability aspect. If they want to develop some complex app, they tend to avoid, and like for the MVP purposes, even try to get away with something which is not technical at all. Like in a way that maybe you don't even need a low code no code thing. Maybe you can just roll out your MVP with an already made template, or maybe you just need some social media page at this point, and that might be sufficient as well. In some cases, obviously, like in digital businesses, you'll have to eventually launch a website or a mobile app, whatever it may be. So I think like in terms of that, increasing the efficiency, low code no codes are great, but in terms of their scalability, or in terms of like developing a full-fledged product, I can't be sure about this at this point.
Last thing, but not the least, if you're not part of the very developed company where you have the resources, where you can experiment with things, even if they are failing, they don't bother you much, a new feature launch or something. But when you are starting from zero, especially the people who are bootstrapping, they are struggling with resources, right? That's why they start the development themselves, sit on Bubble or any other tool to save the money because they have the limited resources. And even for the people who are able to get through the initial launch of MVP, they still don't get enough traction from the customers to to get the money. So they need resources, they need funds. I would like to talk about that.
Having good connections and having people who are able to make good connections and reach out to people, and have good marketing and communication skills, I think that helps a lot as well. Plus, like especially where you're located, your location of the company also matters as well. There are some countries which are very encouraging towards startups, and towards like they have very good platforms, like all of these accelerated programs and stuff like that. So I would advise you to if you are a startup founder and you are working, like looking to gather funds, I think I would advise you to keep up to date about all of these industry trends. Like for example, at this point, UAE tech industry is booming, and they have a lot of accelerator programs and stuff like that to encourage investments in their country. If you're up to date with all of those stuff, you'll get to know about opportunities. Plus, make good connections and make use of all of these social media platforms. I think the biggest right now at this moment would be LinkedIn.
Okay, so when would be the best time for you to go to go to an investor?
Maybe I would go, like personally, I would think I would go to an accelerator program, or to a funding round at a point where I am like confident enough in my idea or my MVP, or I have enough initial data from the customer that I'm confident enough that I need to work on this, or I want to work on this. But the only hindrance at this point should be like the resources aspect. I've tried every other thing. Whatever your goal is, how do you know that you are making progress towards it? Data would tell you. Because if you're not tracking it, you like it's very easy to get lost in it and be very get very subjective about it, lose sight of the whole vision. So I think this is something which is very important.
Okay, so I think we are good for this session of our first podcast. Thank you so much for coming. It was a very good session. Your insights would definitely help our. So have a good day. Anything before going you want to add or tell our audience?
Yeah, first of all, like thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here. And I think I would just like to summarize whatever we've talked about in this discussion. And I think as far as the MVPs are concerned, don't bother about making it flashy. Don't be as probably the title of this podcast or this discussion was imperfection and your MVPs. This is like it's all right if your MVP is not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. If it's perfect, if it's flawless, you probably released it too late.
Best of luck for your journey at Remoto as well. It was pleasure having you, and the people who are watching this episode for you. Just post your comments, or if you have any questions on LinkedIn, on YouTube, wherever you are watching this, just leave comments. What would you like us to add in these podcasts, or if you have any questions, just post in the comments, and maybe I or Saad will answer it, because Saad will be mentioned on the post as well. So yeah, thank you.